Welcome to the deep dive. So, lately there's been a lot of talk about changes to Canada's immigration policies.
Yeah.
And today we're going to unpack exactly what's happening with this so-called immigration reset.
Right.
I mean, it's a turning point.
Definitely.
And, I think a lot of people are wondering what it really means for the future of Canada, right?
Absolutely. It's
Right.
impact going to be.
It's definitely a significant shift, that's for sure.
Okay.
I think the core idea is to create a more sustainable system.
Okay.
But, that comes with a whole web of potential consequences,
Yeah.
both good and bad.
Right. There's always,
There's always.
two sides to every coin.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's unpack this a bit.
Yeah.
We know that Canada saw a huge wave of newcomers during the pandemic.
Yeah, record-breaking numbers.
Record-breaking numbers, in fact.
Absolutely.
So what was the thinking behind that?
Right.
And why is there a need for a reset now? Well, it was mainly a response to labor shortages
Okay.
across many industries, actually.
Right.
You can think of it almost as a temporary fix.
Okay.
But that influx really put a lot of pressure
Yeah,
on existing systems,
I can imagine.
especially when it comes to housing.
Right.
I mean, just imagine trying to find an apartment in Toronto right now
Oh, yeah?
with average one-bedroom rents over $2,500 a month.
Wow. That's
That's a lot.
that paints a pretty stark picture.
It does.
So is this recent like slamming on the brakes for immigration?
Not exactly, no.
Okay.
It's more like
Okay.
adjusting the steering wheel, I would say.
Okay.
So the focus is really shifting back to permanent residents,
Got it.
particularly those with skills in critical sectors,
Okay.
like healthcare and construction.
Right, so really targeting those in demand.
Exactly, filling those gaps.
Yeah.
And actually, you know what? The government is predicting that up to 1 million temporary residents might leave Canada in the next few years.
1 million.
It's a big number.
That's a huge number.
It is.
It makes you wonder, like, what kind of ripple effect
Yeah,
that will have on Canadian cities and towns.
for sure.
Like, what happens to all those apartments?
Exactly.
What about the businesses that relied on those workers?
All good questions.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes this reset so fascinating
Yeah.
and potentially risky.
Okay.
Because on one hand,
Yeah.
it's intended to give the housing market some breathing room
Okay.
and allow public services to catch up.
Makes sense.
But on the other hand,
Yeah.
it raises all sorts of questions about filling those workforce gaps
Right.
and what it means for the future of certain industries.
So it's like a bit of a gamble, right?
It is. There's a lot of unknowns.
We don't know exactly how it's going to play out.
And, some even predict that this shift might even accelerate trends like automation,
Oh, interesting.
particularly in sectors that are, heavily reliant on temporary labor,
Right.
like food services, retail,
yeah.
those kinds of things.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
Absolutely.
But this reset is about more than just managing numbers, right?
Right.
I mean, there's an ethical dimension to this as well, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
We know the government is cracking down on things like fraudulent schools
Definitely. Big problem.
that target international students with false promises.
Yes, some of those scams are truly heartbreaking,
Oh, yeah.
leaving students stranded and in debt.
Yeah, and they're also working to ensure temporary foreign worker programs aren't being exploited, right?
Exactly.
Because there have been cases of that in the past.
Absolutely. It's a big concern.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
No one wants to see people being taken advantage of.
No, absolutely not.
So what's the roadmap for this reset?
Okay.
What's actually changing in terms of policy?
So the government announced a significant reduction in permanent residency admissions over the next 3 years,
Okay.
aiming for a 20% decrease
Wow.
from 485,000 in 2024 to 365,000 by 2027.
That's a pretty big drop.
It is. So they're really
You're serious about this.
trying to, reduce the flow.
Yeah, manage it more carefully.
Yeah.
They're also tightening the pathways for temporary residency.
Okay.
Making them much more selective and focusing on filling those in-demand roles in healthcare and construction that we talked about.
So it sounds like they're trying to really laser focus on addressing
Yeah,
the current housing and healthcare crunch that we're facing.
absolutely. Those are the top priorities.
Okay, but what about the people who are already here on temporary permits?
Right, good question.
I mean, what happens to them?
Well, the government is enforcing residency rules more strictly.
Okay.
So temporary residents will need to leave when their permits expire,
Okay.
unless they qualify for permanent residency through specific programs.
Okay.
And this is where it gets complicated.
Particularly for international students
Right.
who might have seen their education as a stepping stone to permanent residency.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of them,
Absolutely.
that was the goal, right?
Exactly. That was the plan.
Come here, get an education, and then stay.
Right. Contribute to Canadian society.
And now that path is
It's a lot more uncertain.
more difficult, more uncertain.
It is. And,
Yeah.
some might even view that as a broken promise.
Yeah, I can see that.
Especially when you consider the significant investment they've made,
Right.
both financially and emotionally, in coming to Canada.
Absolutely. They've uprooted their lives. They've put in a lot of effort
Exactly. It's a big decision.
to be here.
It is.
And now they're facing this uncertainty.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a tough situation for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Imagine uprooting your life,
Right?
investing in your future here in Canada,
Yeah.
and now facing the possibility of having to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty
I bet.
within the international student community right now.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, too, if this shift could tarnish Canada's image as a welcoming and diverse nation. Is there a risk that
Right.
potential immigrants and students
Yeah.
might choose other destinations if they see Canada closing its doors?
That's a real concern. I
Yeah.
mean, perception matters, right?
Yeah.
And some critics even argue that this reset feels like a betrayal of Canada's longstanding open-door policy.
Right, that we've always
Exactly.
kind of prided ourselves on.
But the government maintains that this is about
Yeah,
creating a more sustainable system that ultimately
okay.
benefits everyone, including newcomers, in the long run.
But how do you balance that, though?
Right.
The need for sustainable growth
Yeah.
with staying true to those values
Right.
of openness and inclusivity that Canada's known for.
It's a tightrope walk.
It seems like a real challenge.
It is. The messaging is crucial here. Canada needs to reassure the world that this isn't about shutting people out.
Right.
It's about making adjustments to create a system that works better for everyone.
Okay.
And they need to back up those words with actions. Right.
So it's not just talk, it's got to be action.
Exactly. Demonstrating a commitment to fairness, inclusion, and support for newcomers.
So what does that look like?
Well, think robust settlement services, accessible language training, programs that help integrate immigrants into Canadian society.
So it's not just about tweaking the numbers, it's about nurturing a sense of belonging,
Exactly.
showing that Canada is still a place where immigrants can build a good life.
It's about creating a society where
Yeah.
everyone feels valued
Okay.
and has the opportunity to contribute.
So we've talked about, the potential downsides for some, but are there any silver linings within this reset? Like, who stands to benefit from these changes?
Well, for one, a more controlled influx of newcomers
okay.
could lead to some relief in the housing market.
Okay, yeah, less demand.
Exactly. Imagine a scenario where the demand for rentals eases,
Okay.
giving developers a chance to catch up,
Right.
and maybe even leading to lower rents for everyone.
Okay, so there's potential there.
There is, and this reset could also give public services like healthcare and education a chance to breathe.
Okay.
With more manageable population growth, we could see shorter wait times for healthcare, improved access to education, more efficient transit systems.
So there's potential for a win-win situation, at least for some.
There is, and this shift also presents opportunities for certain skilled workers.
Right, like in those areas we talked about.
Exactly. Remember how we talked about the focus on healthcare and construction?
Yeah.
Imagine a scenario where skilled healthcare workers, drawn by a clear path to permanent residency, help alleviate the strain on Canada's healthcare system.
Right, so it's if you can attract and retain the right people
Exactly.
with the right skills,
That's the key.
it can actually create a positive ripple effect
Absolutely.
across the entire system.
While there may be some initial adjustments and uncertainty, the long-term goal is to create a more balanced and dynamic labor market
Okay.
that benefits both Canadian workers and the economy as a whole.
We've touched on the issue of fraudulent schools
Right.
that target international students. It's good to hear the government's taking steps to crack down on these predatory practices.
They are.
Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Absolutely. So the government is tightening regulations and increasing oversight
Okay.
of educational institutions that cater to international students.
Oh, they really?
They're scrutinizing everything,
Looking closely at these.
from accreditation and program quality to recruitment practices.
Okay.
It's about making it harder for these sham schools to operate and deceive students.
Good.
They're also raising awareness among prospective students,
Okay.
educating them about their rights, helping them identify red flags
Yeah.
so they don't fall victim to these scams.
It's heartbreaking to think about these students who are lured to Canada with false promises, often going into significant debt,
Yeah.
only to find themselves in a precarious situation.
Absolutely, and it's not just about fraudulent schools.
Right.
The government's also working to ensure that temporary foreign worker programs are being used ethically.
Okay. Yeah, because...
There have been reports of employers taking advantage of these workers,
Yeah.
paying them unfair wages or subjecting them to unsafe working conditions.
Right, and that's simply unacceptable.
Jesus.
So what steps are being taken to ensure fair labor practices for these workers?
They're strengthening labor laws and enforcement mechanisms
Okay.
to protect the rights of temporary foreign workers.
Okay.
This includes increasing inspections, imposing stricter penalties for violations, and providing better support services for workers who need help.
So it's kind of a
It's a multifaceted approach
songed approach.
to ensure that these workers aren't exploited and their rights are protected.
So it sounds like they're really trying to create a system where both employers and employees are held accountable.
Exactly.
And fair labor practices are the norm.
Precisely. And while there's always room for improvement, these efforts are crucial for ensuring that Canada's immigration system is not only sustainable, but also fair and just for everyone involved.
We've talked about the impact on housing, public services, the workforce, and different demographics.
Right.
But there's another layer to this that I think is important to consider.
Yeah.
And that's Canada's reputation on the world stage.
Yeah.
You know, Canada has always prided itself on being a welcoming and inclusive nation.
Absolutely.
Will this reset tarnish that image?
It's a valid question,
Yeah.
and one that Canada needs to manage carefully.
Because some might even say that reducing immigration targets
Right.
and tightening restrictions seems to contradict that image
Yeah.
of a welcoming and inclusive nation.
There's no doubt it's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Right.
The government will need to be very strategic in how it communicates these changes to the world.
Right.
It's not just about the policy itself, but also about how it's presented and explained.
Okay.
Canada needs to reassure the world that it's not turning its back on immigration,
Right.
but rather making adjustments to create a system that benefits everyone in the long run.
So it's a delicate balancing act.
It is.
It's about managing growth while maintaining that commitment to diversity and inclusivity.
Exactly, and it goes beyond just messaging.
Okay.
Canada needs to back up its words with actions.
Right.
Continuing to invest in settlement services, language training, and integration programs will be key to demonstrating that Canada is still a place where newcomers can thrive and contribute.
So it sounds like this goes beyond just managing numbers.
It does.
It's about shaping the narrative of what it means to be Canadian in the 21st century.
It really is. This reset forces us to confront some fundamental questions
Yeah.
about our values, our identity, and our vision for the future.
And those are conversations that all Canadians need to be a part of.
Absolutely. It's not just about policy debates.
Yeah.
It's about shaping the kind of society we want to live in.
This has been a really insightful discussion.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground today, exploring the complexities of Canada's immigration reset.
We have.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll wrap up this deep dive
Okay.
with some final thoughts and reflections.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We've been unpacking Canada's immigration reset,
Right.
exploring its potential impacts on housing, public services, the workforce,
Yeah.
and even Canada's image on the world stage.
It's a lot to consider.
It is.
It's a complex issue
Yeah.
with far-reaching implications.
And I think as we wrap up, it's
Yeah.
important to remember that behind all the statistics and policy changes,
Right.
there are human stories.
Absolutely.
It's easy to get caught up in the big picture,
Yeah,
but this reset is going to touch the lives of millions of people
for sure.
in ways we can't even fully predict.
Exactly. Think about
Yeah.
those international students facing uncertainty.
The temporary foreign workers, hoping for a better life.
Yeah.
Families who might be separated.
Right.
These are the human faces of this policy shift.
And on the flip side,
Yeah.
there are Canadians struggling with the rising cost of living,
Right.
waiting for critical health care, feeling shut out of the job market.
Absolutely.
This reset is aimed at addressing their concerns, too.
It is. It's crucial to acknowledge both the challenges and the opportunities this reset presents.
Right.
You know, there will be winners and losers.
Yeah.
And navigating that complexity with empathy and understanding is key.
We've talked about potential negative consequences.
Yeah.
But what about the potential benefits?
Right.
For some, this reset could actually make things better, right?
Certainly, yeah.
Okay.
Imagine a young family
Yeah.
finally able to find an affordable apartment in their city,
Okay.
or a senior citizen getting the timely medical care they need.
Right.
A more controlled pace of immigration could ease the strain on essential services, leading to tangible improvements in people's daily lives.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, not at all.
There's
potential for positive change.
yeah, and let's not forget about the potential for economic growth as well.
Right.
Attracting and retaining skilled workers in sectors like healthcare and construction can be a real boon for Canada's economy.
Precisely. If this reset works as intended,
Yeah.
we could see a more balanced and dynamic labor market
Okay.
with more opportunities for Canadians and a stronger economy overall.
This whole conversation really highlights the delicate balancing act
It does.
that Canada faces.
Mm.
On one hand, there's the desire to maintain its reputation
Right.
as a welcoming and diverse nation.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there's the need to manage growth and ensure that the system is sustainable for everyone.
It's a challenge that many countries grapple with.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the success of this reset won't just be measured in economic terms or housing start. It'll be measured by how it impacts the lives of Canadians.
Yeah.
Both those who have been here for generations and those who are just arriving.
It's about creating a society where everyone feels like they belong
Exactly.
and have the opportunity to contribute.
It's about ensuring that Canada continues to be a place where people from all walks of life can build a good life for themselves and their families.
Well, this has been a fascinating and thought-provoking deep dive.
It has.
We've only just scratched the surface of this complex issue.
Yeah, just the beginning.
And it's clear that the conversation is far from over.
It'll be interesting to see how things unfold.
It will,
This is a story that will continue to unfold in the months and years to come.
for sure.
And as it does, it's crucial that we stay informed, engaged, and committed to building a better future for all Canadians.
That's it for today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you found it insightful and that it sparked some reflection and maybe even some conversations of your own.
Great talking with you.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep